So we're talking about the dropping of the ballast. So we built these yokes on the sides to keep it in an oriented position so we could drop it straight down. We used a couple house jacks. We cranked them all the way up once we got all the bolts out so that it wouldn't fall very far. And we put blocking underneath for secondary safety factor. And once we got all the nuts off, I was hoping that the whole thing would just drop down very nicely and just fall out of there very gently. But it didn't, and it never does. So we had to use little wedges. I got a couple old axes and put them up between the ballast and the keel and pounded those in to give us a little bit of space. And as it dropped down slightly, we put more wedges in and we just kept wedging it and wedging it. So these are the parts that we've taken out so far. The keelson was up against these floor timbers, which are here. And the floor timbers connect the planking to the ribs, to the keel, to the ballast. They're really one of the most important parts of the structure. So the keelson was a continuation of this piece of wood right here. Now this piece is actually a solid piece that goes from here all the way down to the bottom, and the ballast sets up against the bottom of this. There's a notch in it so that the two pieces, the keel underneath here, which went forward, and the keelson that we had the rotten part in was on top of that. We had to take the bottom part of the keel down in one piece, and then the rest of the keelson, which was attached to the end of this, to the forward part of the forward piece, this is a piece of it that this is one of the best pieces that we had. And you can see where the keel bolts went through here. That went up onto the floors. So this was attached here, and then the larger piece went underneath to hold this all the way up. The other pieces that we took out, we had to saw them in chunks along the floors, each one of the floors. We had to cut this piece so that we had sections in here. They were held together by these marine spikes, galvanized spikes. They pounded them down through the floor into the keelson, so they were down about like that. We couldn't drop the keelson out because you can't take them out once they're in there. They were pounded all the way down to the top of the floor. So what we had to do is cut them into small chunks, and then we took chisels and we knocked the pieces of wood out so that we left the exposed spike sticking down enough that we could get a pneumatic hammer underneath here and drive them back up far enough out of the floor timbers that we could get a really big leverage with a crowbar and pull them right out of the floor timbers, so we could salvage the floors without leaving any steel inside of them to rust later on and create iron sickness in the wood. So one of the difficulties that we had removing the ballast was the bolts that came up through had been replaced, but they put galvanized nuts on top of the stainless steel keel bolts, which was fine when they put them on. They're pretty good sized nuts, and they were able to tighten these things down, and most of the cases worked well. Unfortunately, a lot of them had degraded because they weren't stainless steel on stainless steel. It was galvanized. Once again, the galvanizing goes away and you're left with nothing but steel. So they made these big washers, these stainless steel washers. They put this on the keel or keelson, and then they put the nuts on top and tightened them down. Access to some of these was, well, especially with this one, was almost impossible. When they installed it, they put a socket down through here and they tightened it up. When the socket went all the way down, they just tightened the nut and it was perfect. Unfortunately, this one and several of the other ones had degraded so bad that they were no longer nuts, and we couldn't put a big wrench on them or a socket or anything else to get it off, get them to loosen them up. So what we had to do in this situation, we couldn't get a wrench even in between here. I tried using a pipe wrench, but it just didn't have the throw. I couldn't do anything to it. So what we did was we got an air chisel, and as this sat in here, we had enough room in here to put the air chisel. This is a .401, and we put the air chisel on the edge of the nut and just started pounding it, and the nut eventually let go, and then we go to the next one and we pound that one and it would eventually go, and then we got to the next one and pounded that and just kept on going until the thing came right up off. Fortunately, they were new stainless steel Keel bolts, so the bolt was in good shape and the nut came off the bolt without much problem at all. If they had been galvanized or had been steel, the two of them would have welded each other on, and we would have probably had to cut them off and install new Keel bolts in the whole thing. So